At that moment, I realized my life was built on a lie. But the strangest part of that moment was that 3 days earlier, the internet said my husband was already dead. I found my husband's obituary on a Tuesday morning, which would have been shocking enough, except for one problem. He was sitting right next to me, alive, drinking coffee, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world was wrong. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone with the same name, maybe a typo, maybe the internet being the internet. But the obituary listed his full name, his age, his hometown, even the university he attended. And then I saw the line that made my stomach drop. He is survived by his loving wife, Laura. Laura, that's not my name. So I did what any normal person would do. I slowly turned my phone toward him and said, "Hey, quick question." He looked up, calm, completely relaxed. And I asked, "Why does the internet think you're dead?" What happened next unraveled a secret so strange that by the end of it, 2 wives, a fake funeral, and a missing husband were the least shocking parts of the story. Before I tell you how I found that obituary, you need to understand something about my husband. Because if you met Derrick, you would never imagine he was the kind of man who could disappear. Derrick was the calm one, the quiet one, the kind of man people trusted immediately. When we met 5 years ago, he had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Not distracted, not checking his phone, just present. We met at a small charity event my coworker dragged me to, the kind of event where people wear name tags and pretend they enjoy networking. I was standing near the dessert table trying to escape politely when Derrick walked up beside me. He picked up one of those tiny chocolate cakes and said, "I think these are the only reason anyone came tonight." I laughed. And just like that, we started talking. What I remember most about that night wasn't anything dramatic. It was how easy it felt. No awkward pauses, no trying to impress each other, just conversation that kept unfolding naturally. Within a year, we were living together. 2 years later, we were married. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Saturday morning grocery runs, late night movies on the couch, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Derrick worked in financial consulting, which basically meant he traveled sometimes and spent a lot of time on his laptop. But he always came home. Always. Looking back now, there were signs, small ones, the kind that don't feel like warnings at the time, like how he never talked much about his coworkers, or how he preferred keeping our lives private. He didn't like social media. He said it was messy, complicated. Too many people sharing too much, he used to say. At the time, I thought that made him mature, grounded. Now I realize something else. A man with nothing to hide usually doesn't spend that much energy avoiding being seen. But back then, Derrick was just my husband, the man who made coffee every morning, the man who kissed me goodbye before work, the man who sat across from me at the kitchen table on the morning I found his obituary. Alive, relaxed, completely unaware that the internet believed he had died 3 days earlier. And the strangest part? That obituary didn't just say he was dead, it said he had already been buried. Derrick looked at the screen. Then he laughed. Not nervously, not confused, just casually, like I had shown him a funny meme. "That's weird," he said, taking another sip of coffee. "Weird." "Weird?" I stared at him. "Derrick, it says you're dead." He leaned over and read it again. Full name, age, college, hometown. Every detail matched, except one. Survived by his loving wife, Laura. Derrick leaned back in his chair and shrugged. Must be some kind of mistake. A mistake? My stomach twisted. "Derrick," I said slowly, "there was a funeral." Now he frowned. "What?" "It says the funeral already happened, 3 days ago." For the first time that morning, his smile disappeared. Just for a second. A small pause. But it was there. Then he reached for my phone again. "People mix up identities all the time," he said. "Probably someone with the same name." But I was already scrolling. And that's when I saw something that made the air leave my lungs. There was a photo attached to the obituary. Not just any photo. His photo, the exact same headshot he used on LinkedIn. I turned the screen toward him again. That's you. Derrick didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked to the sink, calmly rinsed his coffee mug, then said something that made the situation feel even stranger. You're overthinking it. Overthinking it. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Derrick, I said, how does someone accidentally publish an obituary with your photo? He turned around, and that's when I noticed something small, something so subtle most people would miss it. His hands, they were shaking, just slightly. In 5 years of marriage, I had never seen Derrick nervous, not during job interviews, not during arguments, not even during the time we got audited by the IRS. But suddenly, an obituary with his name on it appeared online, and my calm, unshakable husband couldn't keep his hands steady. I decided to test something. Okay, I said casually. If it's a mistake, let's call the funeral home. Derrick froze, just for a second. Then he forced a smile. That's not necessary. Why wouldn't it be necessary? If someone used your identity, I said, you should report it. He didn't respond. Instead, he picked up his phone, started typing. What are you doing? I asked. Just checking something. Another pause. Then he looked up and said something that made the situation even stranger. The website probably got hacked. Hacked? By someone who knew his full biography? I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. Okay, I said slowly. Then tell me something. He waited. Who's Laura? The silence that followed was the longest silence of our marriage. Derrick blinked. Once, twice. Then he laughed again. But this time, it sounded forced. I have no idea. No idea. The internet said she was his wife, and he had no idea. That's when something hit me. A memory. A small conversation from 2 years ago. At the time, it meant nothing. But suddenly, it felt like the first piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. 2 years earlier, Derrick had come home late from a business trip. I remember asking him how it went, and he had said something odd. He said, sometimes it feels easier to disappear and start over somewhere else. I thought he was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. Back in the kitchen, Derrick grabbed his laptop. I'll email the site and get it taken down, he said quickly. But curiosity had already taken over. I opened another tab and searched his name again. At first, nothing new appeared. Then I saw something worse. Much worse. Another link. This one wasn't an obituary. It was a memorial page. And dozens of people had already left messages. Gone too soon. You'll be missed, brother. Rest easy, Dan. I started scrolling. More messages. Friends. Coworkers. Family members. Real people. Real grief. And then I saw the message that made my heart stop. It was posted by someone named Laura Bennett. The message said, I still can't believe you're gone. I don't know how I'm supposed to raise our daughter without you. Our daughter. I slowly looked up from my phone. Derrick was standing across the kitchen, watching me, waiting. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. He wasn't confused about the obituary. He wasn't surprised. He was waiting to see how much I had already discovered. I held up my phone. My voice barely came out. Derrick, I said quietly, why does your other wife think you're dead? The moment that changed everything didn't happen during a fight. It happened on a Tuesday night. Nothing special about the day, nothing dramatic about the evening, just dinner, 2 plates, 1 table, across from each other, but somehow 1,000 miles apart. He was scrolling through his phone. I was staring at my food, neither of us speaking. Not because we were angry, but because we had run out of things to say. Or maybe we had stopped trying. Then his phone buzzed. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. But it was the first real expression I had seen on his face in days, maybe weeks. And suddenly, a thought slipped into my mind. Quiet, dangerous. Who makes him smile like that? I hated myself for thinking it, because this wasn't supposed to be that kind of story. There were no secrets between us, no cheating, no betrayal. At least, that's what I believed. But that tiny moment, that tiny smile lit something inside my chest. Something sharp, something cold, something that whispered, Maybe you're not the reason he smiles anymore. I almost asked him. Almost. But instead, I said the safest thing possible. Everything okay? He looked up. Yeah, he said. Then he went back to his phone. Just like that. Conversation over. And that's when I realized something terrifying. We had become polite strangers. Two people who shared a house, shared a bed, shared a life, but somehow, not our hearts anymore. That night we went to bed the way we always did. Lights off, phones glowing, silence filling the space between us. And right before falling asleep, a question echoed in my mind. A question I was almost too afraid to answer. When did we stop choosing each other? But the next morning, I would discover something that made that question even worse. Because the next day, I found something on the kitchen counter. Something small, something simple, but it made my stomach drop. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had moved closer while I wasn't looking. I was still holding my phone. Derrick was still standing across from me, and neither of us were speaking. Finally, he sighed, not like someone caught in a lie, more like someone who had been expecting this moment for a long time. You shouldn't believe everything you read online, he said. I stared at him. Derrick, I said slowly, there's a funeral. He rubbed the back of his neck. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything? People are grieving you, I said. Someone says she's raising your daughter. That's when something changed in his face. Not fear, not anger, recognition. Like a door inside his mind had quietly opened, and he realized there was no way out. Then he said something strange, something I wasn't expecting at all. Did the obituary mention where the funeral was? My stomach dropped, because that wasn't the response of someone confused. That was the response of someone who already knew. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. Derrick wasn't trying to understand the obituary. He was trying to figure out how much I already knew. I swallowed. It says it was in Denver. He nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully. Then he asked another question. Did it say which funeral home? I stared at him. Why does that matter? Another pause. Then he gave a small shrug. Just curious. But curiosity wasn't the feeling sitting in my chest. The feeling sitting there was dread, because suddenly one thought kept repeating in my mind. If my husband isn't confused about his own funeral, then he must already know about it. I opened the memorial page again, scrolled back to Laura's message. Then I turned the phone toward him. Who is she? Derrick looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, she used to be part of my life. Used to? That word hit me like a slap. You have a daughter? Silence. Derrick. Still nothing. Then he sat down, slowly, like a man who had just realized something inevitable had arrived. Yes, he said. The room spun. Yes, I repeated. Yes, what? Yes, I have a daughter. My ears rang. And a wife? I asked. He looked at the table, then nodded. The world tilted sideways. So, you're married? Another nod. But you're married to me. I know. The calmness of that sentence was the most disturbing part. I thought the worst part of the story was discovering my husband had another family. I was wrong, because the next thing he said was even stranger. I thought she believed I was dead, Derrick said quietly. I blinked. What? She thinks I died 3 days ago. I can see that, I said. My question is why? He exhaled slowly, then leaned back in his chair. I didn't plan for you to find out this way. My heart pounded. Find out what? He hesitated, then said the sentence that shattered everything. I faked my death. The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. You what? I faked my death. I laughed, a short, shocked laugh. That's not funny. I'm not joking. My brain tried to process the idea. You staged a funeral? Yes. People buried a body? It wasn't mine. I stared at him. You're serious? He nodded, and suddenly the room felt colder. My husband had faked his death, and somehow, I was the only person who wasn't supposed to know. Why? I whispered. Derrick rubbed his face. Because I couldn't leave. Couldn't leave? What does that even mean? He looked up. You don't just walk away from a child. The words hit hard. But you can apparently stage your own funeral? His shoulders sagged. You don't understand. Then explain. Another long pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. I wasn't trying to leave my daughter. I was trying to leave Laura. Now nothing made sense. So you faked your death to escape your wife? Yes. And you married me while she thought you were grieving? Silence, which was answer enough. But the most shocking twist was still coming, because Laura didn't believe Derrick was dead anymore. We were still sitting in the kitchen, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking, when the doorbell rang. Once, then again. Derrick froze. Slowly. He stood up. My heart started pounding. Are you expecting someone? I asked. No. Another knock. Louder this time. I walked toward the door. Derrick grabbed my arm. Don't. Too late. I opened it, and standing on my porch was a woman I had never seen before. She looked exhausted, eyes red, hair messy, and beside her was a little girl holding her hand. The woman looked straight at Derrick. Then she said 5 words that changed everything. Hello, Derrick. Laura had found him. For a moment, no one moved. Derrick stood behind me. Laura stood on the porch, and the little girl beside her clutched her mother's hand tightly, staring up at the man she clearly recognized. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for someone to explain what was happening. Laura spoke first. Her voice was calm, too calm. I wondered how long it would take before you saw the obituary, she said. Derrick's voice came out low. You shouldn't be here. Laura laughed softly. You staged a funeral, Derrick. Did you really think that would be the end of the story? My heart pounded. You knew? I asked her. She looked at me for the first time, and suddenly her expression softened. I didn't at first, she said. For 3 days I thought he was dead. Her hand tightened around the little girl's. Try explaining that to a child. Derrick shifted uncomfortably. But then things stopped making sense, she continued. The hospital couldn't confirm the body. The police report was vague. And the funeral director kept avoiding my questions. She paused, then looked directly at him. So I hired a private investigator. The words landed like a hammer. Derrick's face went pale. Laura took one step forward. He found your new address yesterday. My stomach dropped. She had been looking for him. But Laura hadn't come for revenge. She had come for something else. She looked down at her daughter. Emma, she said gently, do you recognize him? The little girl nodded slowly. That's Daddy. The word hit the room like an explosion. Everything after that felt surreal. We ended up sitting in the living room. 3 adults, 1 confused child, and a story that had completely unraveled. Laura explained everything. 2 years earlier, Derrick had told her he needed space, work stress, travel, distance. Then suddenly he disappeared. A few months later, she received news of an accident. A body identified through records, closed casket, quick funeral, no investigation. At the time, she believed it. She had to, because the alternative was too strange. But when the details stopped lining up, she started digging, and the deeper she looked, the more impossible the story became. Finally, she looked at Derrick. You didn't fake your death to escape me, she said quietly. You faked it to escape responsibility. Derrick didn't argue. He just stared at the floor. Then Laura stood up. She looked at me, and there was something unexpected in her expression. Not anger, not jealousy, just sadness. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, she said. I didn't know what to say, because in that moment, we were both victims of the same lie. She took Emma's hand. Come on, she said softly. The little girl looked back at Derrick. Are you coming, Daddy? Derrick hesitated. For a long moment, it looked like he might follow them, like he might finally choose honesty, responsibility, reality. But instead, he stayed exactly where he was. Laura didn't argue. She simply nodded, like she had expected that answer all along. Then she walked out the door. And just like that, Derrick was alone. 3 days later, Derrick disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Again. The police found his car at the airport parking garage, but there was no record of where he flew, or if he flew at all. Laura moved to another city with Emma. I filed for divorce. And Derrick? No one has heard from him since, but sometimes, late at night, I still think about that Tuesday morning, the morning I found my husband's obituary. The strange part isn't that the internet thought he was dead. The strange part is that maybe one day he really will be. And someone, somewhere, will read the obituary and wonder if it's another lie. If this story surprised you, let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you found your husband's obituary while he was sitting right next to you? And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.